He said that he wants to hear.
Jai, Sundar wants to hear. Can he hear now?
Is it on over there? It's not showing here on my app. Are you sure it's plugged in like over there?
You can check.
I'll be right there.
Because they're always unplugging.
Yeah, just one sec. I'll do it.
You have to work on the two fronts. On the front and then on the back.
3:113. Cables always seem to be twisted so that the thing is upside down from the.
It's always like that.
I mean, that's a really consistent thing. I'm going to get an echo.
You can shut the door. You hear it out there.
You hear the delay?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a delay. Like 5 seconds, maybe more.
That's in case I say something naughty. Get that 7-second delay. But these speakers, are these speakers working? I don't hear anything. I think that's good for me. Is it my turn now? Victor? Yeah.
Get somebody?
Well, I'm going to start with Om Namoing anyway. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I hope it's my turn.
They'll come stop you, I guess. If not.
Pardon?
I said, please go on, they'll come stop you if not.
Of course, this is going to be terribly awkward when the video is on the interwebs. So today we're hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, Text 13. Sa Esha Dosha Purushadvid Aste. Sa Esha Dosha Purushadvidaste. Grihan Pravishto Yam Apattamatya. Grihan Pravishto Yam Apatyamatya. Krishnasi Krishnad Vimukho Gatashris. Krishnasi Krishnad Vimukho Gatashris. Tyajasu Asaivam Kula Kaushalaya. Tyajasvasaivam Kula Kaushalaya. Sa Esha Dosha Purusha Dvidaste. Graham Pravishto Yamapatyamatya. Krishnasi Krishnad Vimukho Gatashis. Tadyasvasaivam Kula Kaushalaya. Sa Esha Dosha Purusha Dvidaste. Grihan Pravishto Yamapatyamatya. Krishnasi Krishnad Vimukho Gatashis. Tyajasvasaivam Kula Kaushalaya. Others, please. Sa esha dosha purusha dvidasti griham parashtoyam apatyamatya It's the women who are bold. Thank you. Synonyms. Sa, he, esha, this, dosha, offense personified, purushadvit, envious of Lord Krishna, aste, exists, graham, household, pravishta, entered, yam, whom, apatyamatya, thinking to be your son, krishnasi, maintaining, krishnat, from Krishna, vimukha, in opposition, gatashi, devoid of everything auspicious, tyaja, give up, ashu, as soon as possible, ashaivam, inauspicious, kula, family, kaushalaya, for the sake of. Translation. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son. But he is envious of Lord Krishna. And because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious qualities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family. Responsively, please. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son. But he is envious of Lord Krishna. And because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious qualities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family. Exclamation point. Purport. A good son is called apatya, one who does not allow his father to fall down. The son can protect the father's soul when the father is dead by offering sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu. This system is still prevalent in India. After the death of his father, a son goes to offer sacrifices at the lotus feet of Vishnu at Gaya and thus delivers the Father's soul if the Father is fallen. But if the Son is already an enemy of Vishnu, how, in such an inimical mood, can he offer sacrifice unto Lord Vishnu's lotus feet? At Gaya, there's this, what is it called? There are impressions of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. Vishnu Pada, maybe? Can't remember now. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went there after his father's death to offer sacrifice, to worship the Lord's lotus feet, and to offer sacrifice for the benefit of his father. Now, of course, Jagannath Mishra, being an eternal associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was not fallen. But Lord Chaitanya engaged in this family ritual in order to support the culture. But if a son is inimical to Vishnu, what's the point of his going through the motions of worshiping Lord Vishnu's lotus feet? Krishna, we're here in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, I think Krishna Das Kaviraj has Krishna saying, I'm no fool. The context there is someone's a devotee, but they want some kind of material benefit. Krishna says, I'm no fool. This is not to his benefit. So, this time his answer is no. He would therefore be unable to protect his father Dhritarashtra after his death. He himself was to fall down because of his faithfulness toward Vishnu. How then could he protect his father? Vidura advised Dhritarashtra to get rid of such an unworthy son as Duryodhana as soon as possible, if he was at all anxious to see the good of his family. According to the moral instructions of Chanakya Pandit, what is the use of a son who is neither a learned man nor a devotee of the Lord? If a son is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he's just like blind eyes, a source of trouble. A physician may sometimes advise the extrication of such useless eyes from their sockets so that one can be relieved of the constant trouble. Duryodhana was exactly like blind, troubling eyes. He would be a source of great trouble to the family of Dhritarashtra, as foreseen by Vidura. Vidura therefore rightly advised his eldest brother to get rid of this source of trouble. Dhritarashtra was wrongly maintaining such personified offense under the mistaken impression that Duryodhana was a good son, able to liberate his father. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakrurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhangum Langhayate Girim Jatprapatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dimataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhobhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Sa esha dosha purusha dudaste graham pravishto yamapatya matyana krishnasi krishna vimukho gatashris tyajasvashaivam kurakoshalaya. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son. But he is envious of Lord Krishna. And because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious activities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family. Do yourself and the whole family a big favor by just rejecting this character as soon as possible. So, Srila Prabhupada starts his purport by addressing the word apatya. Apatya means a son, good son especially. And so here he says apatya, apatya is one who does not allow his father to fall down. That's a good son. Another word for that is putra. Putra means the son. He's such a good son that he won't allow the father to fall into put or hell. He trayate, he delivers the father from hell by engaging in these different rituals for the ancestors. So you're thinking he's apatya, you're thinking he's putra, but he's really mutra. Mutra is the opposite of putra. You know what mutra means? It comes out of the same place, urine. It's the wrong kind of secretion. In other words, useless, something you want to get away from as soon as possible. So here Vidura is speaking really strong words to his brother. And how is this possible? He's a younger brother. Well, first thing is, the immediate thing is that we see a couple of verses back, Dhritarashtra invited Vidura to come counsel him. Why is that? Well, Vidura, although he was his Dhritarashtra's younger brother, he was his mantri. We heard this word a few verses ago, mantri, laid on. There was kind of a play on mantra and mantri in one of the previous verses. And mantri means the prime minister or advisor. More like in our government, more like the chief of staff. He's the chief advisor to the president. The chief of staff is the president's chief advisor. So it's a very important position. And so the prime minister here is they're like the chief counsel to the king, chief advisor to the king. So Vidura was Dhritarashtra's mantri. Vidura's name means skillful or wise. So there's a little bit of family background, and I'll probably get more into that on Wednesday because it comes right to the fore in that verse. We hear the nature of Duryodhana, the insult that Duryodhana heaps on his uncle Vidura, that gives him his excuse to leave the place and go on pilgrimage, and thereafter hear from Maitreya, from Uddhava and Maitreya about Bhakti Yoga. So there were three brothers, and the eldest of the brothers, Dhritarashtra, who would ordinarily, rightfully have been the heir to the throne, was Dhritarashtra, but he was born blind because of the circumstances of his conception, which we'll talk about in a couple of days. And the second was Pandu, who was born with an unnatural power, again because of the circumstances of his conception. And because of those circumstances, the third son, Vidura, had a lower birth because his mother was actually not one of the father's queens. Anyway, there's much more to the story. And we'll see how that plays out when we hear the exact nature of Duryodhana's insult to Vidura. So Vidura was very wise, and he and his wife were both also great devotees of Krishna. So here he's giving him his counsel, his advice to Dhritarashtra is just as characterized earlier as being right on point, just exactly what Dhritarashtra needs to hear. But as we'll see, Dhritarashtra wasn't able to hear it, at least this time. So he's giving him very strong instructions. This boy is not really he's not really fit to be your son. He's nasty. He's not devoted to Krishna. He is dosha personified. He's fault, offense. He's the embodiment of offense, this particular son. So you shouldn't be sitting here listening to him. And we'll see also in the next couple of days, Duryodhana is being egged on in his insults by other people whose character is not so hot. Shakuni, Karna. Karna's character is quite noble, but because he has a very wounded heart, he didn't always behave in the noblest of ways. So we get Shakuni and Karna and some others kind of like egging Duryodhana on in his insults. And Vidura's advice is considered, even thousands of years later, as being such good advice that any good that any good advice, even thousands of years later, in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's time, is known as the words of Vidura. So, it'd be, well, as Vidura might say, right? You want to give somebody some good advice, well, as Vidura might say, or in the words of Vidura, or as Vidura said. So, good advice became associated naturally with Vidura. So, this is Vidura's business with Dhritarashtra, to give him good advice. So we'll see, this is all setting us up for Vidura to leave and go on pilgrimage and hear from these two great sadhus, Uddhava and Maitreya. Uddhava, so close to Krishna. He's Krishna's personal counselor. He's Krishna's consigliere, right? His chief of staff. And so he goes to hear from him. And then he comes back later to Hastinapura. And he's received, everybody's really happy to see him. He's received very nicely. And again, he sits down with Dhritarashtra and he gives him some advice. And this is also very strong advice. And we heard this previously toward the end of the first canto. This chapter is called Dhritarashtra Quits Home. And Dhritarashtra quits home because this time he's able to hear the advice that Vidura gives him. And this chapter was being read to me. My wife and I were given a gift many years ago, maybe 76, and this acquaintance of ours who was into Vedic stuff, still is, into Vedic stuff, kind of devotional adjacent, bhakti adjacent stuff. And he actually has moved back to the Big Island. But this fellow, this gentleman friend of ours, was leaving the Big Island and selling a bunch of his stuff. He was moving back to the mainland, moving to Washington, where he lived for some time, and then moved back to the Big Island. And he had this stuff that was, strictly bhakti kind stuff. These cool posters, and he had a third volume of the Delhi Bhagavatams. He didn't have the entire set, he just had the third volume. And, because it was Indian paper, Indian binding, it was already starting to get it be in a little rough shape. So when we were living here, one of the friends of the temple was this fellow, Jesus Sanchez, who has since become one of the most famous hand book binders in the world. He rebinds by hand, old, rare books, and is paid quite handsomely for it. And so he was living here in Honolulu at the time, and he was friends with the devotees, came to the temple all the time, kind of becoming a devotee. Although he's taken a long vacation apparently. But so I asked him, if he would rebind this book for us. So he hand bound this volume for us in like brick red, in a brick red binding, and we kept this book on our altar. And there was this period of time on the Big Island when my wife would read to me from this book as I was doing my puja in the mornings, worshipping my Thakurjis. She would read to me from this old Delhi Bhagavatam. And then she came upon this chapter. And she was reading this chapter to me. I don't remember exactly the timeline. Perhaps it was after I had had this dream, those are air quotes for the audio people, encounter with Srila Prabhupada where he pressed me to reconsider my life, reconsider the trajectory of my life, kind of pushed me out of family life. So I had this experience that I hadn't been able to tell anybody about it because it was just too freaky for an inveterate family man like me just to think of leaving family life. But so this was kind of preying on me. This was going on in the back of my mind. And then in the mornings, I'd be sitting, taking care of Thakurjis, and my wife would be reading these instructions to me, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, is she hearing the same thing I am? You'll see what I'm talking about when I read these. And I found out later that she was thinking, oh my God, is he hearing this? So these are Vidura's instructions later on, after returning from pilgrimage to Hastinapura. So Vidura says to his older brother, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Beat feet, make tracks, get out of here, beat it. Do not delay, just see how fear has overtaken you. This frightful situation cannot be remedied by any person in this material world. My Lord, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Kala, eternal time, that has approached us all. Whoever is under the influence of the Supreme Kala, time, must surrender his most dear life, what to speak of other things, such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home. Your father, brother, well-wishers, and sons are all dead and passed away," so this is after the battle. "You yourself have expended the major portion of your life. Your body has been now overtaken by invalidity, and you're living in the home of another. You've been blind from your very birth, and recently you've become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you're coughing up mucus." You could imagine the effect on, on my wife and me, especially me having already, had this dream, but not been able to tell anybody about it because it's just too weird. And I'm hearing this, and it's coming out of my wife's mouth, "Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you're living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by Bhima. There's no need to live a degraded life." he's living on the charity of those he's abused, whose abuse he allowed when they were children. And he's living off of them. So he's telling them, just this is as straight as you can get. There's no sugarcoating here, right? This is the straight cod liver oil kind of medicine, just icky. There's no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You also insulted their married wife and usurped their kingdom and wealth. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live, and even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. Sometimes we get really attached to an old pair of Levi's because, after a couple of years, they actually start to get comfortable. Of course, I'm thinking back to when you bought shrink-to-fit Levi 501s with button flies, and they were as stiff as a tin roof when you first bought them. And then after a couple of years of washing and wearing and starting to get worn away, now they're becoming comfortable, and then all of a sudden there are holes in them, and they start to fall apart, and we're patching them, trying to keep them going as long as we can, and eventually they just give up the ghost. He is called an undisturbed Dhira, who goes to an unknown remote place and, freed from all obligations, quits his material body when it has become useless. He is certainly a first-class man who awakens and understands, either by himself or from others, the falsity and misery of this material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on the personality of Godhead residing within his heart. Please, therefore, leave for the... Which way is the north? Leave for the north immediately without letting your relatives know, for soon that time will approach which will diminish the good qualities of men. Talking about Kali Yuga. And so Dhritarashtra was able to provide, with these strong instructions, after all that's happened in the intervening years, including the destruction of just can imagine the disruption, and this was what Arjuna was talking about in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He was like, well, can you imagine how society's going to become unraveled when all these fathers and husbands and sons and nephews and everyone, millions of them are going to be killed. Society's going to be a mess. It's going to be a little rough on the economy, especially the economy of all the widows. Not to mention their hearts. It's going to be a disaster. So after all that's happened, finally Dhritarashtra is able to kind of get the point. But you hear how bluntly Vidura is speaking. He can do that. Just like you have, the court jester, the court fool, and we think of somebody who's simply a jokester. But the thing is, his business was to tell truth to power, right? Tell truth to power, disguised sometimes as jokes, sarcasm or whatever. And in Bengali culture, you've got the famous Gopal Bhand, the stories of Gopal Bhand, who was a court fool for, I can't remember who now. And I remember back in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s, when Jayapataka Maharaj used to stop off in Honolulu for a few days on his way between Asia and New Orleans and then South America. He would tell in classes, he would tell wonderful stories from Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavata about Chaitanya. I still kind of remember him telling about how when Lord Chaitanya, I think I mentioned this on Nityananda's appearance day, when Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda met at the house of, who was it? Nandanacharya, I think it was. And the temple marking that spot, there's a temple, a Gauri-Nitai temple with beautiful deities that just down the road toward Navadvip from Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. Of course, back when I was in Mayapur, last time I visited, the only time I visited Mayapur was 1980. That was all like farmland out there. So there was like these open fields in the whatever it was, quarter of a mile between our temple and Nandanacharya's house. But I remember visiting that temple and being so struck by the beauty of those Gauri-Nitai deities. They were just so sweet. And then Jayapataka Maharaj would tell this story about how when Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda met, they were just like completely overwhelmed with bliss to see each other. Finally, the brothers are meeting, And Jayapataka Maharaj's speech is a little subdued nowadays because of his age and physical infirmity. Although if he hadn't had the stroke, he probably would still be bellowing this out, but I can remember him, just telling him, Nitai! Huge Jayapataka Maharaj voice, Gaura! And, they're embracing each other and falling down in the road and everything. So, how did we get there? I don't know how we got to Jayapataka Maharaj. Anybody retrace my steps?
Oh, I'm visiting Hawaii.
Yeah, something reminded me of that. Anyway, so we see, I was talking about Gopal Band stories. So another thing that he would do at home programs in the evenings, I went to a few home programs, we always would invite him over to their homes in the evenings, and we'd have prasadam and have kirtan. And Jayapataka Maharaj, sometimes he would tell stories from Chaitanya Leela, but he would also tell Gopal Band stories, which can become a little risque in some ways, a little graphic, I think, and funny as heck, especially the way Jayapataka Maharaj would tell them. We'd all be rolling on the floor. So Gopal Band could, he had this position where he could speak truth to power. He could tell all these kind of, sometimes a little off-color stories about bathrooms and stuff in order to make a point to instruct the king, to give him some good, strong advice. So here, Vidura is giving Dhritarashtra such good, strong advice, the words of Vidura, telling him in no uncertain terms what a great calamity it is to have a son like Duryodhana. And then you've got Dushasana and 100 others, what a mess, 99 others. What a big mess this is. And he's telling them straight out. And of course Duryodhana gets a little upset, and we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of days. Anybody have any quick questions or comments?
Did you run into Balaram when he was in pilgrimage?
It sounds like a Mahabharata question, and you may have read it more recently than I. He may well have, because Balaram, we know from the Mahabharata and the Bhagavatam as well, that Balaram also went on pilgrimage. He used the impending battle as his excuse to go on pilgrimage, and had quite some adventures there. And
Didn't he slay some demons as well?
Oh, all kinds of things happened. He had sons and killed
Wow.
killed demons and stuff, and the excuse for that, for his going on pilgrimage, was the battle, because he was really good friends somehow with Duryodhana. He actually taught.
Was he his martial teacher?
Yes, he taught Duryodhana martial arts. He taught him especially the art of club fighting. There were, except for Baladev, Duryodhana had no match, not even Bhima, had no match in fighting with the Gada, with the club, because his teacher had been Balaram. So it may, I'm not sure. Yeah, the timing might have been coincidental as well. So there may be, and I just can't recall. My memory is failing. My teeth are getting loose and broken and stuff, and my eyesight's getting pretty bad. So, but there would be something cool to look up in the Mahabharata. Yeah, so that's possible. Thanks, Sean. That's a good question. Anything else? Okay. Thank you all so much for your patience.
Thank you.
Bhagavatam Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.